Hello everyone and welcome to the 8th Archimake's Teatime questions. I'm Antoine and I'm pleased to be joined by Mariam, who is in my Archimake group and with me to interview today. Hi Mariam.
Hi Antoine.
There's a summer camp coming up on designing an outdoor classroom, which is a real project to be built.
Yes, maybe we can take some inspiration from our guest today. I'd love to have curvy classrooms.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you're interested to join us, please use the link below to let us know. So today in our Teatime Q&A, we're really pleased to have Hanif Kara with us. Hanif Kara is a structural engineer and co-founder of leading London studio AKT II. He also teaches design and is professor in architectural technology at Harvard School of Design. His office works internationally and have won over 350 design awards. Welcome, Hanif.
Hi, Hanif.
Hi, Mariam. Hi, Anton. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to Archimake.
So Hanif, what's your tea time drink today?
I've got water.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
So
Hanif, can you tell us what inspired you to become an engineer?
So when I grew up in Uganda as a small boy, which is in East Africa, and I could see the connection between the way buildings and the environment, the built environment, how it changes people's lives. So as I was growing up, I also followed my dad around a building site. And when I grew up at about 16 or 18, I started to think that what I wanted to do is work with the built environment, whether it's buildings or power stations or whatever. So it started early in my life.
That's a really inspiring reason. You get it from where you live and your surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is a really inspiring thing.
So, what was your favorite book that inspired you early in your career?
You know, there wasn't a particular book as such. What I think inspired me very early on was my physics teacher. So when I was about 14 or 15, he did some experiments showing me how weights can break things, strings and metal and so on. And the physics book that we had for class at about 13 or 14 was probably my favorite book at the time. So I was one of those geeks that didn't really read about much apart from maths and physics. So I would say there wasn't a single book in my early life.
Thank you. It sounds really fun to learn how things break and how things are heavy.
That's basically what a structural engineer does. He has to make sure that things don't break and they're safe when other people have designed them, whether it's a home or a railway station or a school, whatever. So you need to just understand how materials work. And I was really fascinated by that, how far you can push materials.
I know you have worked on some amazing projects. What was your favorite project that you worked on?
Well, you know, engineers are not like architects because we work with many building types and many architects. We don't support any one particular building, but we support the type of work we do. So my favorite sort of work that I've done has been with some really famous architects, which I'll show you later. But in terms of particular building that I feel made me feel really good was when I started my own office and we did the Peckham Library in Peckham. And it went on to win a lot of awards, and it was for getting small kids into the mode of going into a library. So it was a really colorful, wonderful building in Peckham, near Peckham High Street. And I think that building inspired me to think more and more. I wouldn't say it was my favorite project, but it was one of the early things that made me realize I can make a change to the lives of people through working with architects and through working with their clients and making the buildings more interesting.
Thank you. That's a really good thing to do, to be able to help people with the knowledge that you have.
Yeah. That was the whole idea.
So we're all spending more time at home than ever before. What is it that you love most about your home that gives you a sense of well-being?
I think it's the colorfulness. As you can see, I've got a yellow background. I'm really into color in a big way. So the thing that inspires me the most or makes me feel really good is, I have a very nice window right next to where I work, and I can see the weather change all the time, every hour, which when you're in an office, you never saw that. And then also in the back garden along my street, I've been watching the plants grow and the summer come out, which, to be honest with you, for the last 20 or 30 years, because I've been busy working, I didn't really get much of a chance. And the last thing is that I have all my books surrounding me in here. I never get the chance to read them, but being at home, I've been able to read quite a lot more than I used to.
I really like the color yellow because it's like a sunshine color and it brings more brightness and happiness.
It's true. Colors can change your mood. They can make you feel better. They make you stand out. There's all sorts of interesting things about color, and architects really know how to use color. That's how I've got my interest developed through working with architects.
It brings life to a building.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm homeschooled like most children in the country lately.
And I'm in secondary school, and some watching are in primary school. What suggestions would you give us to explore our interest in engineering?
So one thing is to always look up. So whenever you're at home or school or walking the streets, always look up to see what it is you're walking next to. Even in play areas like slides or swings or whatever, just see how things are made, how they stand up, what stops them falling over, how big they are, how small they can be. Because one of the things that I think interests engineering is very interesting, because even your own toys, when you first start to play with it, you'll find many engineers will tell you Meccano and all those little toys that we used to play with before the iPhone, and plasticine, we used to shape things in our younger days, stay with you for a long time. So I'd say that, if you as young kids are one thing is to look at everything that's going on around you. The other is always, now with the digital world, you have so much access to buildings that people can show you virtually how they work, how a laboratory works, how an office works, how a home works. You can see a lot of SketchUp tools, how to sketch buildings. So that's the other thing to do outside school or even within school, is to learn how to use some of those tools to draw, because drawing is the key to being an engineer as much as it is to being an architect.
Whenever I'm walking outside, I'm always keeping my head up and I'm always seeing different new buildings and the colors and the designs, and it makes me just want to go home and draw them.
That's wonderful. You should keep up the idea of drawing if you like it, because that's one thing, that both digitally and with your pencil, because you'll find that there's a time when you draw something and it is a certain size and scale, and then it becomes like a real building at a building scale. So drawing is one really interesting hobby, no matter what you do, what you study.
Hanif, I know you're passionate about mentoring and educating young people.
Yeah.
What do you think of what we are doing with Archimake, and how does it help to learn this at a young age?
Fantastic. I think that it is incredible what Archimake have done. I don't know of many organizations that get children interested so early. So I think, first of all, Archimake's doing a wonderful thing. I think that more people that get involved with Archimake, like this session that you're having with me and with others, to share our experiences, will make you youngsters face it and understand that all of you can do this. It's not really complicated. You don't really have to worry about the fact that you will have to do certain A levels, go to university, and so on. But people that grow up, like your parents, could have done any of this, and you'll be inspired by it. So what Archimate can do more, I think, is get even more people involved from the industry. And then if once COVID is over, I heard that you're thinking of making a small structure. So making something will be interesting. I know that you have workshops, and I know that when we didn't have COVID problems, you had some really good workshops, really good stuff that Cheryl and all of the team from Archimake had organized already. So I think just keep doing more and more of that, and stay interested with the industry. Visit some sites when they're being constructed. So if you live near your home safely, go and look at what's going on site, how a building comes up from nothing to becoming a home. I think these are things of site visits, making things, models of things as well, not real buildings. These are the things that I think will educate you in engineering and architecture.
Thank you so much for answering all our questions. Can you please show us a little more of your favorite project now?
What I thought I would do is, instead of, because I'm not an architect, I'm an engineer. So instead of showing you a single building, I would show you two of the most inspiring people that I've come across in the last 30 years who are architects. Dame Zaha Hadid on the left-hand side and Lord Norman Foster on the right. And I've worked with both of these people in different ways. So I thought, rather than picking one and picking a building, I picked people who I think have influenced architecture and engineers right across the world and represented our disciplines really well. So on the right of this slide, you see a building by Zaha Hadid, the curvy one, and then further to the right is a mayor is Lord Foster's building. That building is the one I'll talk about first very quickly. It's in London. What you're seeing is the drone view in the bottom left, and then where it is, it's a really big headquarters building for Bloomberg, so it's a working space. So when we started to design this building in London, it's right near St. Paul's. One of the reasons I wanted to show it to you is how history connects you back to the future as well. We found Roman London underneath here. We found archaeology. We found something like 15,000 artifacts, because this is where London started from. What you're seeing in the bottom picture is the archaeologists digging up all this stuff. And then on the right-hand side, the museum that we put inside the building. So I wanted you to understand that dense cities like London have a lot of archaeology that's made by people historically, and that history needs to connect back to the future. So this is a very large office building. And one of its key things is the right-hand diagram was to try and make it as climate friendly as possible. So deal with some of the climate issues, such as not too much ventilation, deal with the future when we may be able to take in air. So that what you're seeing is a very clever design by Lord Foster's office at the bottom there of how the skin can open and close to let air in. This is a headquarters building for an office of Mayor Bloomberg. So there's about 4,000 or 5,000 people that work inside this. What you're seeing in the red and gray is what was underground and you will never see again. These are all the piles that we had to pile up to support the building. And here you're seeing the entrance to the building. You can see that it's made of timber, fantastic curvy shape. And you can see that we made a little spiral staircase that takes you all the way up to the building. And what you're seeing is the people coming in from that first shape. Then they walk up the ramp, and you see in the bottom left there, sitting in the pantry at the top of the building, where they're privileged with a fantastic view of what defines London, which is St. Paul's to some extent. And then the right-hand side, you see the building from the outside. So if you ever have the chance to visit, it's accessible to the public. You can see all the things we found underground because we created a museum, but we also display art, and you can also go and see how wonderfully the architecture is made. And then I thought I'd show you one of Zaha Hadid's building, which is at another extreme. This is now an international project, so it's Azerbaijan. And here the role of the architect and the engineer was to give a new symbol to a country that is growing and changing its identity. So this is a theater, library, all sorts of mixed use. It's got 2,000 people opera house inside here. So one of the requirements here, unlike London, was that it had to be a national treasure. So the tourists would go to it and the citizens would enjoy it and show it off as their symbol. And you see that engineers have to deal with really curvy things and really not curvy things, which is where I go back to the physics. What you're seeing here is the shot of what it was made of, how curvy it is, and how we use computers today to analyze forensically and look at carefully how you make the building. Then we test it on site. And then bottom right is the performance going on in the opera house. And here you see the building finished. You see some shots of how people are using it inside. It looks like an incredible heavenly space almost. Then on the right-hand side, how it's lit at night, and the front and side views, how it's also used as a backdrop or a lot of scenery. So that's what I wanted to show you. Rather than show you favorite buildings, I wanted to show you two favorite people for all of us, for all architects and engineers. These two people have influenced us a lot in what we all do today. And the next generation of architects and engineers will benefit from not only their buildings, but also the way in which they've inspired us all over the world.
I really like how you chose some architects rather than a building that you made, but some really inspirational people who, yeah, as you said, have really changed the world in what they
Thank
do.
you.
And I also really like how you chose really curvy buildings, because, yeah, how even though that some of them weren't curvy on the outside, they had lots of curves on the inside, like the staircase.
Yeah, I think it's important that, and it's nice to hear you say that and observe that, because I think the engineer's role is to make other people's ideas stand up, solve their problems. But also, I think we're also human, so we like nature. Curves are very close to nature, and you shouldn't be afraid of them, but you shouldn't always use them. So I thought I'd show two extreme examples, one for London and one that wasn't in London. One done by an inspiring lady and one done by an inspiring man.
I loved your presentation.
Thank
My
you.
favorite projects that you showed was Zaha Hadid's curvy building. I really loved all the curves, and white is like a very bright color. And the building that I can't remember the man's name, but
Lord Foster.
the one he built, I really liked the shapes and the colors.
Thank you. You should read more about them both to get more inspiration and look up their work. You'll be very interested in some of the things they say.
Thank you so much for sharing your project with us and answering all our questions.
Thank you.
We have a question from Devash.
Yeah.
How could architecture and waste management infrastructure be integrated?
That's interesting because I think he's been looking at what work I've done. And one of the things I built was in Copenhagen, an energy to waste power station, which has a ski slope on top. It's quite well known. So I have an interest in waste. So, for example, I think in answer to his question, how can you integrate architecture and waste? First of all, we all need to realize how much waste we create. Human beings in the UK create something like 30 million tons of waste a year just from your kitchen waste. That's the equivalent of about 35 to 40 million buses, double-decker buses, and that would wrap around the world. So you can imagine how much waste we actually create. 3 to 5 million buses. And I think that's the first step, is to realize how much waste we make. Then the second step is to understand how we can recycle it. 80% of these things can be recycled, and then use those tricks plus the construction waste and find ways of designing so that people are not afraid of smelly waste. Put it in the middle of cities and don't make it too big so people can access it. So in the case of the waste plant we did in Copenhagen, the government chose to put it right in the middle of the city, put a ski slope on it, a climbing wall, so that everybody's not afraid of it, and you can see that you should create less waste. So I think one way of integrating is to take more interest in it, learn about recycling it, and also make sure you don't create too much waste. That way architecture can respond to all of these things. I hope that answered his question.
We may have time for one or two more questions before we finish. Please type your question into the chat. Meanwhile, I have a question for you, Hanif. My favorite Zaha Hadid building is Haydar Aliya Cultural Center. Which is your ultimate favorite building?
I haven't yet done it. So I still hope that I will do a building one day that I can say was my ultimate favorite. I've been so lucky, as I said to you earlier, in building so many buildings. Fortunately, with my team, I have 400 people in the office and a lot of partners. I've been so lucky to work with young and older architects. I haven't found something that I would like to say is a favorite. But I can say to you that, many of the projects that we did at King's Cross and the Olympics were all really high class buildings, and I adore them all. It's not that I don't want to choose one. It's more that I don't think it's the role of an engineer to show his taste. His role should be to make things work more efficiently and better, and make sure they work. I hope that answers the question.
We have a question from Nida. How do engineers and architects work together? From 7-year-old twins Sophia and Isaac.
That's a very good question. Yeah, sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it's not fun when we work together because we all want to do something different. But the best way to work together is starts at education level. So one of the big things is to start understanding that engineers and maths and physics also has to take care of aesthetics, looks, color, all sorts of things. And for architects to understand that maths and physics is important. So when I find myself working with the best architects, they already know very well a lot about what I do as an engineer and how could I help them make what they do work. So it's a collaboration always, but you always have to let the architect imagine the ideas because they are trained to do this better than engineers. We're physics people who can only largely solve the problem, occasionally contribute to their ideas if you find one doesn't work as well as another. So the way to work is collaborate, get to understand each other's job, and develop an empathy for each other's work.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
have a question as well. So before, in a previous interview, we've heard of the Canada Water Library.
Yeah.
What do you think was the hardest thing that what do you think that was the biggest struggle in the Canada Water Library?
Very, very good question. You've done a lot of research, both of you. So I worked on that project with Pierce Goff and CZWG architects. And the hardest thing about that building is it's an inverted pyramid because we had a small footprint, but we had to build a very big library on top. So if you imagine a pyramid and then turn it upside down, the hardest thing was how do you stop it falling over? And one side of it actually spans over the water. There's a waterway there. So for us, the hardest thing was really balancing it to a point where it still makes sense for us to make such a big footprint on top of a very small floor, at the base. So we had a huge roof and then a small foot at the bottom where you go inside. And I think the balancing act was really the hardest thing for us to do, to pack so much inside that building. It's one of my favorite buildings.
So Connor asks, when did you know you wanted to be a structural engineer, and were you interested in how buildings are constructed when you were young?
Yeah, so I think I knew it about when I was about 16. I was pretty sure I wanted to do something to do with buildings. And then when I went to university, I studied civil engineering. And at that time, I was only interested in roller coasters, in offshore oil rigs and large power stations. So I wasn't interested in architecture when I first started. I just wanted to make really big buildings and difficult buildings. So once I managed to do that, get a degree, and then go and work on site and understand how buildings work, then I moved towards more interesting buildings later on when I started my own office with my partners. So I knew at about 16 that I wanted to be an engineer that could solve other people's problems. Good question.
Thank you. I don't think we have any more questions.
No.
So thank you very much, Hanif, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Hanif.
Thank you, Mariam and Anton. How confident you are. I'm so impressed. It's really wonderful to see you guys.
Thank you. And
Thank
thank you at home. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. If you would like to do a drawing of one of the projects Hanif mentioned, please email it to us and we'll send it to Hanif as well.
That's the end of Teatime Q&A for today. If you'd like to see my and Anton's summer presentations, please visit the link on the screen now.
Thank you.
We'll say bye for now. I hope you join us next week for our interview with architect Ron Nakomba, an associate at Field & Clegg Bradley Studio.
And if you have someone you would like us to invite to Teatime Q&A, please send your suggestions to our email below. we will leave you with my presentation from the summer term. Bye!
Bye.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, this is my tiny home on wheels. My tiny house is cost-effective, lightweight and eco-friendly. My house is for people who want to travel. It's an affordable house for everyone. The next picture is my structure. This is a steel structure which holds everything up together. We then have vinyl flooring, which is really good. We then have the timber structure, which is really good material to use. We also then have the cork insulation, which is stuck to the walls with cheese glue. We then have the oven to wash dishes. There is a water pump in place. We also have the compost toilet and shower room together. We also have the comfy poof seat. And of course, my lovely double bed. I also made this ladder by hand to get to the loft. I then have this eco-friendly metal roofing, which is really good. I also have a detachable solar panel. And this is what everything looks like inside of the home. You can see there is everything in there: the toilet, the poof seat, the ladder, my bed, and the table. So, let's take a moment to look at these. And this is my tiny home on wheels. Thank you for watching.